So what do
right.
you make out of what's going on here in Phoenix?
Well, I do think there's a lot of reasons why they're good, but you have to start with Chris Paul. There's no question about it. I did a piece on Chris recently and spent some time talking with him. And you look at the numbers, Devin Booker's a great scorer. We know that. He's, as Doc Rivers would say, a professional scorer. And DeAndre Ayton's this sort of nice young player that needs some time. And Chris Paul was the perfect person to drop into that situation because he called Book ahead of time and said, I don't want to be the leading scorer on this team. I want to make you as successful as possible. I think DeAndre Ayton, in the piece that I wrote, admitted he needed someone to step on his rear a little bit and kick him along. Mm-hmm. And Chris Paul is the best at doing that. And so if you look at their numbers, their defensive numbers, their offensive numbers, everything is significantly better. And I point directly to Chris Paul. He's an MVP candidate, a deserved one. I was talking with one of my members of the National Brethren. We both have a vote. And this particular person told me I was, agonizing a little bit over Jokic and Embiid, and now I'm voting for Chris Paul.
And why is that late in the season, do you think, Jackie? What's he?
I think it's because I think people, early on said, oh, aren't the Suns a nice little story? Aren't they a nice little story? Chris Paul's completely reinvented himself because remember now, he leaves Houston and everybody's thinking, oh, what a shame. He's kind of done. He didn't look good at the end of his time there. He missed a lot of games, which was not normal for him. And as you know, he changed to a plant-based diet. He made some changes and sort of got him steeled to really prove people that he wasn't done, that he was ready to go. And then he gets traded to Oklahoma City, which is by all accounts a rebuilding team, and really didn't even call him right away because they weren't sure they were even going to keep him. They were maybe going to flip him to the Miami Heat. So I think when in the early months when the Suns were doing well, they're like, okay, well, Chris proved himself in OKC. He's back to it. He's playing well. This is a nice little story. Mm-hmm. But I think they underestimated Monty Williams, who I think is one of the most underrated coaches in the league. And that's been true for many, many years. And I think they underestimated the effect Chris would have on the team. And I also think they underestimated, when I look at the roster for the Phoenix Suns, Booker, Ayton, Chris Paul, they get all the attention, of course. But Mikal Bridges is a player that's just beginning, where we haven't even seen the best of him yet. And when I was talking with Chris and Monty and James Jones, all of them went out of their way to mention Jay Crowder and the effect he's had on this team. You need veterans like that, who have been there, who have done that, who are gritty, who know like that trap game. They can tell you about that in the locker room beforehand. Said, we're not going to fall into that trap. So I think as the season wore on and the Suns kept winning, everyone's like, okay, maybe not just a nice little story. Maybe these guys are legit.
When you look at Monty, what strikes you most about what he's done out here?
What I like, he's just so innovative. And I did a story on coaches' plays. I think it was a year or two ago. And I immediately called Monty because I've heard for years from other coaches how innovative he is. And he was telling me about a play that he wanted to run when he was in Philadelphia as an assistant. And they said to him, no, that's too crazy. We're not going to run that. And then he got to Phoenix and he ran it and he got booked for an open three. So I think what I like best about Monty is he's not afraid to try things. And even if other teams think it's crazy, he doesn't. And clearly his rapport with the players is one of his biggest strengths. And one of the things that I found interesting that I didn't know before I did that story on Chris Paul was their 1 year together in New Orleans. Monty was a first-year coach. Chris was a very young player. They really butted heads. And Monty kind of and they got along. They respected one another, but they had differences of opinion. And Monty said, I always thought I had to be right. And same thing with Chris Paul. We know that about him. That's his biggest strength and maybe arguably his biggest weakness. And so I didn't realize how important it was for Monty to have another crack at Chris Paul, if you will. And look at how they operate together. So he has great credibility and respect in that locker room. And that's super important, as you know.
Before I get you out of here, do they have a shot this year? Or is this, there's still no finals experience, not even Chris.
Right.
There's no experience on this team for postseason, Brad. So enjoy the ride. It's going to be a nice ride. However, where are you at on that?
I think that's a fair presentation. I bet Chris would argue with that. I think the key, honestly, to me, is DeAndre Ayton. I really do. I think he's the X factor because I know what Chris Paul is going to give you. I think we have a pretty good idea what Book's going to give you. Some of the young guys off the bench, okay, maybe. But Chris, Jay Crowder, again, he's been around. Saric, even though he's been around a little bit, you've got some guys that have been around. So it comes down to me, to the young big guy, and can he stay locked in my conversations with him? And I really enjoyed talking with him. He's a really delightful kid to talk with. I found him to be really entertaining. One of the things I asked him about, some of the specific things that Chris Paul's been helping him with, besides the fact that he's just on him all the time and kicking him in the rear end, which he certainly acknowledged. But he said one of the other things was that Chris kept talking to him about positions you've never been in before, and how you don't let those positions overwhelm you. And from what I gather, this is a concurrent theme that Chris Paul has had with all the guys on the Suns. So I think he's doing his very best to prepare them for playoff basketball, because as we know, playoff basketball is very, very different.